So Veenome, you guys have really sort of honed in the product and the focus the last 6 to 12 months. Tell me a little about what you guys are focusing on right now.
Yeah, so our central premise is basically that there's a lot of tools out there that can kind of grant you demographic information, and we think that one of the most important things during a video ad impression is kind of the content, right? And so right now, generally, the content knowledge is limited to the page URL, right? And so you have all this information on demographic and very little information on what the person's actually seeing. And so, in addition to kind of viewability metrics, we're looking at and figuring out what's the content that's actually inside the video, indexing the actual imagery of the content, figuring out how many videos are on the page, where the videos are, how big they are, and then kind of just adding this information into the ecosystem through our customers, ad networks, ad servers, these kinds of things.
Right.
And as Ritu mentioned, we don't buy or sell media, so we're if you don't want people sort of grading their own homework, then we're a good source to use because we really aren't involved in any kind of ad transaction.
Right. Well, and it's interesting because I love your name, right? Because it's Video Genome was the original thought of it, right? Which I think is great. So being able to kind of contextualize the content or a video itself. I mean, how's that insight and information become actionable?
Yeah,
right? 'Cause it's slightly different than keyword buying,
it is,
right?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways in which that gets used. All of our customers use it in a slightly different way, but you can use it to idealize the buy. So some people, some ad networks that use us will actually look at the categories of the videos themselves and kind of think about different things that they can buy to match it to correlate it to higher completion rates, right? So if someone is looking at inventory to buy, they can look at categories that are getting higher completion rates and kind of focus more on that content category. And then on the sell side, they're looking at remnant inventory, right? So they say, okay, I've got 1 million impressions of kind of unknown, maybe it's got some objectionable content, and they sort of index it for both brand safety and category, and they're marking it up by removing the objectionable content and segmenting it. And so lifting the average CPM, what might be, if you start at $4 and you get technology and automotive and all these different categories with higher CPMs, you're lifting the average CPM by understanding the content and making sure that you don't have the kind of objectionable content, these kinds of things.
And I mean, part of sort of, the logic that you're building, so I'm assuming that just the scale, you have to automate the indexing, right? And part of building that logic, I mean, are you refining it for performance as well? Or is it a very, as objective assessment as you can of the content of a video itself?
Yeah, I mean, we use taxonomies, like we use the IAB taxonomy, we use brand safety taxonomy that's traditional in display, so the same kinds of taxonomies that like an integral ad science or somebody like that would use to kind of mark up brand safety.
Right.
We use avoidance categories, and so we kind of stick within those buckets, mostly because that's sort of what people are used to. A few folks ask for kind of very specific things, and we'll tweak the categories that we're doing and sort of figuring out what things we're identifying. We started out actually, and I talked to Tal about this, we started out indexing things so that we can make the objects clickable inside a video, and we can still do that, kind of tagging objects, but there isn't necessarily demand for that on either end of the market, right? So that people are sort of, they know that they might have like a fashion ad, but they're not necessarily looking to run an ad on, as much as I would like to think that they are, to run an ad on a video with a Nike logo, let's say, or something like that, right? And so that level of specificity is technologically, we can do that in terms of our technology, but it doesn't really operate in a business.
But how does that all reconcile, right? Because the value of having the index and sort of a video genome is that you have more insight about the context, and context, drives relevance, which drives effectiveness, right? That's kind of the pattern of logic. But the reality is that if those legacy taxonomies about which you've spoken and you're using, they don't necessarily reconcile with audience-based buying.
Right.
And we've talked more and more about one of the best values of automation is the ability to buy online video on an audience basis. So how's that coming together in a real sense?
I mean, it's not necessarily that you'd have one or the other, right? So of course it's important to know the audience that you're trying to reach, but at the same time, you don't need to know nothing about the content, right? So the sort of situation we're in now is you see this list of page URLs, and that's really the knowledge of the content that you're running on. Well, we're just saying, look, we're going to add information to the ecosystem, and you can do with it what you want. And so it's not necessarily either or, like you'd buy based on the content, but maybe, just perhaps, that the moment that you're watching the video and the content that you're watching is actually really important to the ad experience, not just the fact that you think that I'm male age 33 and in some location, maybe one of the things that's really important is the video that I'm actually watching and the moment that I'm watching.
Right. So I mean, we talk about adjacency, right? Because that's a big part of it, and especially understanding contextually what is in the video allows us to be better informed on the buy side when we talk in regards to adjacent content, right? But how much does the actual advertising content itself, the creative content, need to align to the content of that is the online video against which is being bought? How does that affect performance? Like, have you guys actually examined that? Because that's what your product allows for, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the uses of there's a lot of other uses like general auditing. That is one of the uses. I'll say this, I think, at least, from a personal perspective, I find it sort of jarring to be watching a video about something and have the ad be targeted based on something I searched in my email kind of 2 hours ago. And so, we don't have an opinion on that. We're basically just saying, don't you want to know the moment that the stuff that your user is interested in the moment that the ad is running? And that's really, if they're running the video and watching it, that's really important. And but we're not necessarily making a judgment. We're just providing the information.
Right. And just to sort of wrap it up, where have you seen the greatest value creation as far as on the agency buy side for leveraging your tools to drive better effectiveness?
I think at least right now, one of the most effective things is trying to correlate completion rate with content category and player size, and sort of looking at the number of videos on the page, looking at player size, looking at content category, and then correlating completion rate and being able to kind of get more of that inventory. Yep. That's been super effective, and people have been really happy with that. So.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.